What is up, everyone? Tyler here, and we have some big-time projections for March Madness. If you're unfamiliar, on the women's side, there's two top 16 reveals from the tournament, the bracket committee, whatever their name is, and we have just gotten the final one before March Madness. Let's dive into this. So first off, UCLA is the number one seed, and I think rightfully so. Absolutely rightfully so. Notre Dame obviously dropping the game to NC State. That plays a big role in this. But to me personally, I mean, look, they were always my number one team. And even after the loss to USC, I felt that they still should have been the number one team in the nation. I have no qualms. Texas is the number 2 seed overall in all of this. Notre Dame, USC is the way that this goes. I mean, there's a lot to kind of take away here, frankly. When it comes to matchups that are interesting, let's just kind of go region by region here and break this down. UCLA, if memory serves you well, you remember who knocked them out last year. And that was LSU. And that game was a fun one. And so just from a narrative standpoint in that becomes very, very fun. And figuring out, I mean, you kind of have depth. You have star power in UCLA, obviously, but it's a little bit more depth-based than LSU. And so if we were able to get that matchup, it feels like it would come down to, can the Stars give star performances for LSU, the Flauges, the Anisas, Michaela Williams. And obviously we've seen the one loss that UCLA had came from a star performance. And it's a little bit more variety with LSU than with USC, but we'll talk about USC once we get to their region. North Carolina and Kansas State are two teams that North Carolina has come along. Kansas State, they're aiming to get Ayoka Lee back, which would be a very interesting matchup, seeing Ayoka Lee versus Lauren Betts. But ultimately, Ayoka Lee is going to be trying to ramp herself back up. Coming off this injury, she's been out for a minute now, and is going to be trying to ramp herself back up, and that is a big ask, right? But you do have Serena Sundell. You'd have Ayoka back at that point. But ultimately, if you're UCLA, I feel like you should be feeling pretty good about this region. Overall, again, LSU is a genuine tough matchup just because LSU is a very, very good team. And frankly, I feel like if you look at any of the 1 or 2 seeds and you told me, yeah, they'll be in the Final Four, I would completely understand it. And that's where it gets, tricky in this March Madness and in this more open era of March Madness with women's basketball. And so it's very exciting as well, right? And so LSU UCLA would be cinema. That would be such a good game. And again, obviously the rematch, right? And seeing how that would go. But let's kind of just keep it pushing. This literally just came off the TV. These are my immediate reactions. Again, Texas, the number 2 overall seed, NC State, TCU, Ohio State. I kind of love this for NC State, honestly. That's my knee-jerk reaction here. Texas, I think NC State beat Texas last year, if I'm not misremembering. Yeah. So that's another rematch. That's another rematch right there. Ohio State was the last team into this top 16. So just for kind of just as we kind of continue to keep from the last top 16, this was the last top 16 and where we were. Let me zoom in a little bit. So Texas moves up, South Carolina down to a 2 seed. We'll talk about them. Notre Dame also moves up to number 3 overall. USC moves up to that last seed. But if you go down here, Ohio State was still a 4 seed, but Tennessee was the last one in. So we've seen Tennessee boost their stock since this last one, which was on February 15th. And again, you're just kind of seeing the stock move in really just across everything right now. So I feel like the biggest, one of the teams that have shook the table the most, absolutely, is NC State. And their insane game of the year caliber win over Notre Dame in double overtime. Look, NC State was a Final Four team last year. They lost some pieces, but you kept your stars. And it's a team that, to me, has kind of struggled to ramp up a little bit this season. But they seem to be peaking at the perfect time, right? I mean, when you talk about a team that can score on the perimeter, that's NC State. Isaiah James, Zoe Brooks, Sanaya Rivers, you're talking NC State. And I think the thing that worries me most about Texas, and I left after watching the Texas game against LSU in person, boots on the ground, I left that game feeling very good about Texas, right? And I was very impressed by the ability to come back. However, I do fear the idea of Texas playing a team that can get hot from three. And NC State certainly has the perimeter scoring to space them out. Now, does anyone – I think another interesting part here, there's a lot of size from the teams out of Texas. Texas has several bigs with major size. Sedona Prince, size in herself. Not a ton of size for NC State and Ohio State. So this region of Birmingham 2 could genuinely come down to what wins out, the perimeter or the post. And it might just be a game-by-game thing. And obviously, these are just the top 4 seeds. And this is not official. This is just the last time that we'll see from the committee before we get the official bracket for March Madness. And so the different types of teams in Birmingham, too, is very, very interesting to me. And frankly, there might be a case to say that right now, TCU potentially has the most balanced attack because of the way Haley Van Lith has been playing. And that's a very interesting concept, right? And, we'll see how they finish out their season. They got the essentially Big 12 regular season championship game against Baylor this weekend, who has also been playing pretty damn good. So that's very interesting. And I think that there's very fair arguments about the competition when it comes down to the post that Sedona Prince has been playing in the Big 12. But ultimately, she's been producing. And obviously, you always got to preface it with not that is just purely on the court. Good Lord, Sedona. That's neither here nor there. But, again, very, very interesting. And from Ohio State, they have all the talent to make a run. I've actually – obviously they're still here in the top 16, but I've been semi-disappointed from Ohio State this season. Had some injuries here and there, kind of just like mini spurts of games where players have been out. But when you talk about a team that can – if they can catch their stride, be on the lookout for Ohio State in the Big Ten tournament. Because if they can build some momentum and get Cody McMahon going and get that defense going and get those perimeter players, those guards out, I'll be very intrigued in how they come into the tournament. Because to me, they have all the talent that they need, but they just have not been able to really kind of get that ramped up in the way that I had hoped to see this season from Ohio State. Ooh, do we want to go Birmingham or Spokane? Let's go Spokane. Let's talk USC because Birmingham is a bloodbath, and I got thoughts. First off, immediately, first thing I see, USC UConn, run it back. Let's do it. That's what I'm talking about. Give me the rematches. You want to talk about, again, another rematch from last March Madness, right? The Elite Eight, where UConn beat USC to advance to the Final Four. Give me that. We saw earlier this season, USC go to Storrs, Connecticut, and beat UConn. Give me that rematch. Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you. But I don't want to just stop it there, right? Because I think that, look, this is actually UConn beat Duke as well, and one of the nastiest March Madness games I've ever seen. This is a whole region that we just saw last year. We just saw this. So, one thing that I do find interesting here is if Duke if, and this is a big if, so I want to preface that because UConn looks very, very good. If Duke can get past UConn and they meet up with USC, they are the type of team from a defensive perspective that I feel can potentially upset USC. And I mean, you got to understand, if you're getting to that point, you're talking Duke to the Final Four. And I'm not saying all that, but I'm just saying from a pure matchup perspective here, Duke is a team that can disrupt so much. And we've already had all the dialogue and all the talks about USC's offense, USC's system, how much they rely on JuJu, how little they rely on some of the other players at times. That would be a very, very interesting matchup. Now, again, do I think that they get past UConn? No. But in the hypothetical here, that would be super interesting. And Kentucky is a team that, like, you have your young bigs who are very, very talented. You have Georgia Amore, who has taken a team, who has helped take a team alongside Liz Kitley in Virginia Tech to a Final Four a couple of years ago. I mean, ultimately, to me, this region feels like all roads lead to the rematch of USC UConn. And I am here for it. I love it. I love it so much. But let's talk Birmingham 4. I feel like this is probably going to end up being the region that gets talked about the most. Notre Dame at the 1 seed, South Carolina at the 2 seed, Tennessee, Oklahoma. Now, I think the immediate question, I apologize, by the way, I'm still battling this cold, but I think the immediate question is South Carolina dropping from the number 2 overall seed to now the 2 seed and USC jumping up. Let me pull up these resumes. Let's just look. Let's talk through this, right? Obviously South Carolina has several good wins. And USC just beat UCLA. So, like, let's look. So USC, right? So you've lost to Notre Dame. So you're not going to be above them in this. You beat UConn, great win. Beat Maryland, solid win. Lose to Iowa, beat Ohio State handedly, beat UCLA, hand them their first loss. 2 ranked wins here, and then obviously the UCLA game to come, right? So you're talking 2 losses. Notre Dame, who was a 1 seed, and Iowa, who I would be interested in knowing, and there's no way of knowing this till the bracket comes out, I would be interested in knowing where the respect level for Iowa lies now. We've just seen them play UCLA close. You know, if you've been following the whole season, I've been very high on Iowa. Even like they had that nasty skid at the beginning of the Big Ten, but ultimately, I still think that they can cause some nastiness in the Big Ten tournament, in the March Madness tournament. But let's look at South Carolina, right? Early in the season, they beat NC State, which has only just continued to age better and better. Lose to Clemson. And in pretty dominant fashion, right? And when that happened, and especially when it came to the way it felt seeing South Carolina lose. Iowa State has not aged well at all. Duke in the top 16, TCU in the top 16, right? I mean, you're talking 2-3 seeds right there. Texas, a 1 seed that you split with. Alabama, you beat. Oklahoma, you beat in your region as the 4 seed. Tennessee, you beat in your region as the 3 seed. LSU, you know, like when you look at the resumes, and I understand the losses here, right? The Texas loss is a close one. The UConn loss here as well. To me, does USC have a better resume than South Carolina? I mean, I'll tell you right now, my first reaction is no. My very initial reaction right now is no. I would have, if this was me, I would probably have UConn as, oh man. I mean, obviously, and you also talk, what have you done for me lately, right? Realistically, if you look at the most recent stretch of games, South Carolina has 2 losses and USC has beat UCLA. And I feel like that weighs heavily. But when it comes to the amount of quality wins, I'm not sure anyone in the country has more than South Carolina right now. And so, frankly, for me, I could have seen it where USC was like the top number 2 seed right now. South Carolina was the bottom number 1 seed, and had USC beat UCLA again. If you want to come and talk to me, I'd be okay with that. But again, I mean, that is a pretty brutal region. Notre Dame, South Carolina, Tennessee, and Oklahoma. I mean, look, Oklahoma has Reagan Beers playing her best basketball right now, that maybe arguably in her career, 2 back-to-back career highs. And so when we talk about peaking at the right time, it feels like Oklahoma has started to do that with Reagan Beers specifically, which is massive. Tennessee, I mean, they beat UConn. We saw that. And we've seen I mean, I don't have like a stat for this or anything, but I don't think there's as many teams that have lost with smaller margins to good teams than Tennessee, than I've ever seen. I don't have some type of stat for that or anything, but I'm just watching the games. The scores have been close. I don't know if there's been a team at the level of Tennessee that has lost as many close games, right? So that's another very tough team. And South Carolina obviously goes without saying, very tough. I will say I'll be interested in seeing as we get into the SEC tournament. One, if they win out and Texas wins out, you have a coin flip to decide the number 1 seed, which could be massive. It's interesting to look at, though, because technically speaking, if South Carolina loses the coin flip and it's chalk across the board, they would have to play LSU. And then presumably they would have to play Texas in the SEC final. And if they go and win the SEC tournament, I don't know if you can hold them off that number 1 line at that point, especially if they go from the route of number 2. But I'll tell you right now, Notre Dame has their hands full. When I'm looking at some of these 3 and 4s, I mean, you have interesting matchups, but when it comes to where I feel like genuinely how far, when it comes to genuine, interesting ways that teams can find a way to beat you in their own way, Tennessee and Oklahoma are 2 of the tougher ones, because if they just get hot, they play with such pace and everything, they can get snowballing in a way. And Tennessee has the subs, which are unique, and the energy that they play with. Oklahoma has the size and Reagan Beers. Now, I'm not saying that Notre Dame's about to lose to either of those teams, but I do think it's genuinely an interesting region to have. And also the fact that we just have so much familiarity with these SEC teams. I mean, look, South Carolina absolutely stumped Oklahoma. Tennessee, it was a closer game, but I mean, it was still a pretty relatively comfortable by the end of the game win for South Carolina. So again, and then obviously South Carolina speaks for itself. Notre Dame, that region to me just stands out as a potential just for it to be brutal. And if one team gets hot, you could see some crazy stuff happen there. I'll be interested in seeing from South Carolina. Again, I mean, obviously conference tournaments are still to play. Notre Dame has a ranked game as I'm time of recording this that they're about to play Florida State tonight. You have Louisville as well. And I mean, you have to win out. And sorry, my phone was ringing. You have to win out, right? In order to solidify your spot at the top of the ACC. And you have to now do that in a bounce back. And we haven't seen them have to bounce back in ACC play. So I'm interested in that. I'm interested in seeing what NC State does in the ACC tournament. Because if NC State can keep up this momentum and crescendo into the March Madness tournament, I can see them in the Final Four. But yeah, I mean, just kind of freestyle off the top. I'm sure we'll have more on this as more comes out. I mean, there's so much to be excited about. March is nearly here. The best time to be a subscriber of No Cap Space. If you weren't here for last year's March Madness, when I tell you we were live damn near every day, if not every day, that is going to be the plan. And so we will have you covered in this entire tournament. And certainly we'll have some stuff for conference tournaments as well. If you missed out earlier today, Legendarium from Andrew, a fantastic piece. And just it's so good. All Legendarium pieces. Go check that out. New mock draft. If you want to see the full print version, you can see that on nocastspacewbb.com. Link in the description. First round is free. Second and third round is for our paid tier, our ball knowers tier. And tomorrow I will have a breakdown of my thoughts on Producer Shawty's first round draft. I'm so excited. He's been killing it with the mock draft. So go check that out if you haven't. And make sure you're subscribed here on the YouTube. Hit the bell so you know when we go live. March Madness is as close as it can be without being here. And we go crazy during March. We try and give you as much coverage as we possibly can. So be tapped in for that. Be tapped in on the website as well. And we'll see you next time.